It begins in the shadows of the Cold War, a time when fear wasn't just a feeling, it was a weapon. The United States believed the Soviet Union had discovered a terrifying breakthrough, the ability to control the human mind. Whether the threat was real or imagined didn't matter. What mattered was that America couldn't risk falling behind. So in 1953, the CIA launched a program that would go down as one of the most disturbing operations in U.S. history. Its name was simple, but its purpose was terrifying. Cultra. Behind locked doors and steel walls, scientists began experimenting with drugs, hypnosis, sensory deprivation, and psychological torture. They were searching for a way to erase memories, implant ideas, and break a human being down to the core. And they didn't just use soldiers or volunteers. Many of the subjects had no idea they were being experimented on. Civilians, prisoners, students, mental patients, even CIA employees were secretly dosed with LSD for hours. Sometimes days. Lives were destroyed, minds were shattered, and the victims' stories were buried under classified files. One of the most haunting cases was Dr. Frank Olson, a government scientist who was unknowingly drugged by his own colleagues. Days later, he was found dead, having fallen from a 13th-floor hotel window. The official story claimed suicide. But decades later, his family learned the truth. He had been given LSD without his consent. Many still believe he didn't jump. He was pushed, silenced to protect the program. The CIA denied it. The documents said otherwise. But here's the darkest part. Most evidence of MKUltra was destroyed in 1973, when CIA leadership ordered the files burned. Only a few boxes survived, just enough to reveal how large the project truly was. And those surviving papers only deepened the mystery. How far did MKUltra go? Were there successes the public was never told about? And were the experiments really shut down, or just moved deeper underground? To this day, nobody knows the full truth. The official line is that MKUltra failed. But the idea of a secret government program designed to break minds, change behavior, and shape human consciousness didn't die. It simply slipped into the shadows, becoming one of America's most chilling conspiracies, because much of it wasn't fiction at all. It was real. In 1962, the world stood on the edge of nuclear conflict. The Cold War was escalating, Fidel Castro's Cuba was aligning with the Soviet Union, and American leaders were determined to remove him from power. But there was a problem. The American public didn't want another war. So, inside the Pentagon, a group of high-ranking military leaders crafted a plan that crossed a line few imagined the U.S. would ever approach. They called it Operation Northwoods, and its purpose was to justify an invasion of Cuba by manufacturing the outrage needed to launch a war. The proposal was chilling. The U.S. government would secretly stage acts of terrorism on American soil and blame them on Cuba. The ideas were not vague theories or possibilities. They were written, detailed, and approved by the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The plan included fake hijackings of commercial planes, the sinking of boats carrying Cuban refugees, staged attacks on American military bases, and even the planting of bombs in U.S. cities. The victims would be American citizens. The goal was simple: create fear, anger, and national unity behind a full-scale invasion of Cuba. The documents even described how to fabricate evidence, how to make the world believe Cuba was responsible. It wasn't just deception. It was psychological warfare aimed at the American people themselves. And according to the files, the Pentagon was prepared to begin immediately. But there was one person who stopped it: President John F. Kennedy. Horrified by the proposal, he rejected the plan outright. And for decades, the American public had no idea any of this happened. It wasn't until the 1990s, when the files were declassified, that the truth came out. Operation Northwoods wasn't a conspiracy theory. It was a real plan written and approved at the highest levels of the U.S. military. And that revelation opened a terrifying door. If the government was willing to consider staging attacks on its own citizens in 1962, what else had been planned? What had been attempted? What had succeeded in other forms? To many Americans, the existence of Operation Northwoods became proof that the line between national security and manipulation had once been dangerously thin. It showed that conspiracies, no matter how unbelievable, sometimes began with official signatures and government seals. and Northwoods became a symbol of how easily truth can be shaped, staged, or sacrificed in the name of strategy. It wasn't just a plan, it was a warning one that echoes through history. In the summer of 1947, something fell from the sky over Roswell, New Mexico. A rancher discovered strange debris scattered across his land, unusual metallic pieces, thin, flexible materials, and fragments covered with symbols no one could identify. Unsure of what he had found, he contacted the local military base. What happened next became the spark for one of the greatest mysteries in American history. On July 8th, the Roswell Army Airfield issued a press release claiming they had recovered a flying disc. Newspapers exploded with headlines about crashed saucers and visitors from other worlds. But within 24 hours, the story changed. The military issued a new statement. It wasn't a flying disc, it was a weather balloon. The shift was immediate, forceful, and suspicious. Reporters were shut out, witnesses were pressured to stay silent, and the debris disappeared into military trucks, never seen again. For decades, people who were there told stories of materials that seemed impossible to bend or break, metals that returned to their original shape, and crates carried off under armed guard. Some claimed bodies were found, small humanoid figures transported to secret facilities. The government denied everything, insisting the weather balloon explanation was final. But in 1994, the Air Force quietly changed the story again. Roswell, they said, was actually part of a classified program called Project Mogul, designed to detect Soviet nuclear tests with high-altitude microphones. This wasn't a weather balloon, it was a secret surveillance system. That explanation raised even more questions. Why did witnesses describe materials nothing like balloon equipment? Why did so many military personnel insist the wreckage was nothing they had ever seen? And why did the government hide the truth for nearly 50 years? The Roswell incident remains unsolved, not because there is no information, but because there is too much conflicting information. The original story, the retraction, the new explanation, the eyewitness testimonies all clash in ways that make the truth impossible to pin down. If the debris were simply from a classified device, why intimidate civilians? Why threaten military staff? Why replace the original headlines so aggressively? Today, Roswell lives in a unique space between fact and legend. It may have been a secret surveillance balloon. It may have been something else, something the government still believes the world isn't ready to know. And the more the story changes, the more people question what really fell from the sky that night. November 22, 1963. Dallas, Texas, a sunny afternoon that dissolved into tragedy within seconds. President John F. Kennedy was waving to crowds from an open limousine when shots echoed through Dealey Plaza. Panic swept the streets. The motorcade sped toward Parkland Hospital. News anchors struggled to speak. And within an hour, the world learned that the 35th President of the United States was dead. The official version came quickly. A former Marine named Lee Harvey Oswald had fired 3 shots from the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository. He acted alone, investigators said, case closed. But almost immediately, the story began to crack. Dozens of witnesses claimed they heard shots from multiple directions. Some saw smoke rising from the grassy knoll. Others reported hearing gunfire from in front of the motorcade, not behind it. The timeline didn't fit neatly. The ballistics didn't make sense. And the famous magic bullet theory that a single bullet changed direction, hit multiple people and emerged perfectly intact became one of the most debated pieces of evidence in American history. Oswald himself insisted he was innocent, claiming he was being used as a patsy, but he never got a chance to defend himself. 2 days after his arrest, he was shot and killed on live television by nightclub owner Jack Ruby, with Oswald dead. The truth died with him, or so it seemed. The Warren Commission concluded Oswald acted alone. But years later, a congressional investigation came to a different conclusion. Kennedy was likely assassinated as a result of a conspiracy. That single sentence changed everything. It wasn't proof, but it was confirmation that something didn't add up. Since then, theories have pointed in every direction: the CIA, the Mafia, Cuban intelligence, Soviet agents, military officials angry about Vietnam, oil tycoons, political rivals. Some theories are wild, others are disturbingly plausible. And the secrecy surrounding the case only fuels the uncertainty. Thousands of documents were classified for decades. Even today, parts remain redacted. Every time files are released, new questions emerge, not answers. The JFK assassination is not just a case, it's a paradox. The event was witnessed by hundreds, filmed by civilians, and investigated for years, yet the truth is still incomplete. Too many contradictions, too many silenced voices, too many secrets sealed away. For many Americans, the assassination wasn't just the death of a president. It was the moment trust in the government began to fracture. A moment when the official story felt too simple for such a complicated crime. And 6 decades later, the question remains the same. Who really killed John F. Kennedy, and why? When World War II ended, the world discovered the horrors of the Nazi regime concentration camps, forced labor, human experimentation, and weapons capable of unimaginable destruction. But as the war collapsed, another race began, a race between the United States and the Soviet Union to capture Germany's best scientists. Their knowledge could change the future of warfare, space exploration, and global power. And America was determined not to lose. So the US launched Operation Paperclip, a program designed to secretly bring Nazi scientists to America. These weren't ordinary engineers, they were some of Hitler's brightest minds. Many were members of the SS. Many had worked directly with the Nazi war machine. Some had overseen experiments on prisoners in concentration camps. Their hands were not clean. Their histories were unmistakable. Yet instead of facing trial, they were given new identities, new homes, and prestigious jobs. The US government erased their records, altered their files, and in some cases lied to the public about who they truly were. Why? Because the Cold War was beginning, and America needed these scientists more than it needed moral purity. The most famous was Wernher von Braun, once a leading member of the Nazi rocket program. He designed the V-2 rocket, a weapon that terrorized Europe. After the war, he became the father of the American space program, designing the Saturn V rocket that carried astronauts to the moon. He's celebrated as a hero today, but his past is rarely mentioned. Other paperclip scientists helped create chemical weapons, advanced aircraft, and even early forms of mind control research. Some worked on biological warfare. Some shaped military strategy. Some used techniques they developed under the Third Reich to advance American military power. The conspiracy isn't whether Operation Paperclip happened, it did. The conspiracy lies in the cover-up, the altered documents, the erased crimes, the sanitized resumes, and the decades of silence about who these men really were. The American public was told these scientists were brilliant refugees fleeing oppression. In reality, many were loyal Nazis whose talents were seen as too valuable to waste. Operation Paperclip reshaped the 20th century, boosting America's space race, missile development, and military dominance. But it also raises an uncomfortable truth. Sometimes nations trade morality for power, and sometimes the legacy of that trade remains hidden behind classified files and rewritten histories. In 1932, hundreds of black men in Tuskegee, Alabama, were told they had bad blood, a vague term that could mean anything from fatigue to anemia. Government doctors promised them free medical treatment, free meals, and burial insurance. Many of the men were poor, uneducated, and trusted the doctors who claimed to be helping them. But there was no treatment. No cure, no honest explanation. These men were unknowingly enrolled in a secret government experiment designed to study the long-term effects of untreated syphilis. For the next 40 years, the U.S. Public Health Service watched as the disease slowly destroyed their bodies, their families, and their futures. When penicillin was discovered in the 1940s and became the established cure for syphilis, the doctors running the Tuskegee experiment deliberately withheld it. They lied, saying the men were receiving treatment while secretly allowing the disease to progress. Some men went blind, some went insane. Many died painful, preventable deaths. Wives were infected. Children were born with congenital syphilis, diseased from the moment they entered the world. This wasn't a rogue group of scientists. It was a government-sanctioned program, funded, approved, supervised, protected. For decades, nobody knew. Records were falsified, reports were hidden. Officials claimed everything was ethical. It wasn't until 1972, when a whistleblower leaked the story to the press, that the truth burst into the public eye. The country was horrified. The program was shut down. Survivors and families were compensated. And years later, the President of the United States issued a public apology. But the damage was irreversible. The Tuskegee experiment became one of the most devastating betrayals of trust in American history. It proved that the government had not only experimented on its own citizens, it had allowed them to suffer and die for the sake of data. And the fact that it continued for 40 years raises a haunting question. If this could happen in daylight, carefully documented, and quietly maintained, what else happened behind closed doors that never came to light? Tuskegee wasn't just a medical conspiracy. It was a moral catastrophe, a reminder that secrecy and science, when combined without ethics, can destroy lives in ways far more horrifying than fiction. September 11, 2001, stands as one of the darkest days in American history. Nearly 3,000 lives were lost in a series of coordinated attacks that reshaped global politics, national security, and the American psyche. The world watched in shock as the Twin Towers collapsed, the Pentagon burned, and a hijacked plane crashed into a Pennsylvania field. The official investigation concluded that Al-Qaeda carried out the attacks, and that part is not disputed. What is disputed are the events leading up to 9/11 and the information the U.S. government had before the tragedy occurred. Over the years, declassified documents, whistleblower testimonies, and congressional reports have revealed a pattern of warnings that were ignored or never properly shared. Multiple foreign intelligence agencies warned the United States about an impending attack, some with details that matched the final events. Several hijackers were known to U.S. intelligence prior to the attack. Some were on watch lists, some had been monitored. Two even lived with an FBI informant. Every nation has leaders, presidents, prime ministers, elected officials who appear to control the direction of the country. But behind them lies a deeper structure, one built on intelligence agencies, defense corporations, private contractors, billionaires, think tanks, and unelected officials who remain in power regardless of elections or political parties. In the United States, this network is often called the shadow government or deep state, a term that sounds like fiction but points toward a real and complex system. This doesn't mean a secret cabal meets in underground rooms plotting world domination. It means power doesn't always come from the people voters can see. Intelligence agencies hold classified authority that even presidents struggle to understand fully. Defense contractors influence foreign policy by funding research, lobbying politicians, and shaping military strategy. Major corporations write portions of the laws that benefit them, and political leaders simply sign off. Billionaires steer economic policy through donations, foundations, and media control. And high-ranking officials in security agencies outlast elected governments, shaping decisions that the public never hears about. Think about it. Presidents change every 4 or 8 years. But the heads of agencies, the policy advisors, the defense analysts, and intelligence directors often remain for decades. The surveillance networks they build don't disappear. The black budget operations they run don't stop. The partnerships with private defense firms don't reset. Power simply shifts hands quietly, invisibly, without public scrutiny. And that's where the conspiracy begins, not in secret societies, but in the very structure of government. Classified programs operate without oversight. Money flows through programs Congress barely understands. Whistleblowers face prison. Journalists investigating secret operations often find doors closed, files sealed, and sources silenced. Even elected senators have admitted they don't know how some intelligence programs work or who exactly controls them. The question isn't whether a shadow government exists. It's how much influence it has. When intelligence agencies can withhold information from presidents, when corporations can dictate public policy, when the military budget grows regardless of the administration, and when classified actions shape foreign affairs without public consent, the line between democracy and quiet control begins to blur. The shadow government is not a single entity. It's a system, a blend of secrecy, money, and power that continues no matter who wins elections. It operates in the spaces where transparency ends. And for many Americans, it represents the ultimate conspiracy. The fear that the people they vote for aren't the ones truly in charge.